My name is DJ. If we've not met, I'm so glad you're here this morning and would love to meet you and get to know you. That applies also for those of you who are online, may not get the chance to meet today, but we would love for you to reach out and let us know if there's some way in which we can be praying for you or help you feel more connected to us here at New Vine. Last night I was at a musical with my younger daughter, Emmy. It was a musical called 13, and it was about the trials of finding acceptance and finding your fit amongst your peers as a 13-year-old. And my daughter, Emmy, she, for some reason, she had this sort of long-term bucket list kind of dream role of playing Patrice in this musical 13. Anyway, she got to play it last night, and it was a great show. But Patrice is this kind of smart, nerdy kid who none of the popular kids like very much, set in America. And then this new kid arrives in town who's trying to find his place by winning over the popular kids. And he invites Patrice to the movies one night when everyone is going. And then, even though he really likes Patrice and she's been a good friend to him, all of that, he can't bring himself to sit with her when all the other kids are there. It would kind of mess with there was other stuff going on too, but it would kind of mess with his desire to kind of fit in and find acceptance. Because it all kind of worked out all right in the end. Anybody ever been in a situation like Patrice? Maybe back in school, maybe you're kind of reliving trauma even as I talk, or... Anyway, we'll come back to that. Well, last week, by the way, thanks to everyone for your prayers and for those who cooked meals for us, offered meals, while our older daughter, Bethany, was going through her fourth and hopefully final round of spinal surgery in the last couple of weeks. We're incredibly grateful for the support and love of our church family here. And all went well, so we're hoping, as I say, this is the last time. We'll see how it goes in the longer term. But a big thanks to Zach too for preaching last week, in which he shared about his experience of being both invited to and welcomed in. In Zach's case, it was, if I remember correctly, to a youth group about 17 years or so ago. Is that about right? And if you weren't here last week, do go back and watch the sermon. It was a great sermon in this series that we're doing called New Vine by Design that Em mentioned earlier, about intentionally building the kind of culture that we want to experience and we want others to experience here in our church at New Vine. If you were here last week, you might have found yourself thinking back during Zach's sermon to a time when you were invited to and welcomed in somewhere. But maybe you can think of a time when you had a different experience, an experience a bit more like Em's character Patrice in that music which I described, where maybe you've had the experience of being invited to, but then not really welcomed in. Maybe it was a social gathering, a birthday party, New Year's Eve party, or a camping trip. Maybe it was to a church. Maybe it was to this church. And you showed up. Everyone else seemed to know someone, or at least, if not everyone, they knew someone to talk to. And you showed up because you were invited along. You're feeling a bit nervous because here's one of those little secrets. Everyone feels nervous when they walk into a social situation amongst people they don't know and wonder if there's going to be anyone to talk to or whether they'll be left on the margins. Everyone experiences that. We often think that's just us, but it's a kind of almost universal. I say almost universal experience because it might not be true if you're either an extreme extrovert or a sociopathic narcissist. Have we got any extreme extroverts here this morning? Have we got any sociopathic narcissists here this morning? Wouldn't admit it even if they were. Maybe I'm one, I don't know. But even most extroverts, and certainly the rest of us, feel some level of social anxiety or nerves stepping in a room full of people that we don't know. Isn't it kind of know that we have that in common? That that's the kind of universal experience? It's not just us who feel that way. Real? Anyway, so you've showed up because you've been invited along. You're feeling a little nervous, maybe dreading it all a little on the inside. And sure enough, like Patrice, you ended up feeling left on the margins. No one made the effort to get to know you, maybe beyond a few words of small talk. Maybe the person who invited you made a bit of an effort, but nobody else did. Or perhaps even that person was kind of busy all night and you got left on your own. The point is, it's one thing to be invited along. It's another thing to be welcomed in. It's one thing to be invited along. It's another thing to be welcomed in. And I love that about Zach's sermon last week, how both of those need to go together. But of course, the opposite is also true. New Vine could be the most welcoming place in Newcastle on a Sunday morning. And wouldn't that be awesome? If we get there, wouldn't that be wonderful? But even if we're the most welcoming place on a Sunday morning and no one is invited along, then no one gets to experience that welcome. The welcome isn't made real. So again, really agree with Zach's sermon last week, what he said, and encourage you to listen to it. But we want to build an intentional culture that, as Zach said last week, a kind of a come and see culture that invites us to and welcomes us in. A culture of come and see, but also a culture of come and join us. Come and be part of the community here. A culture of welcome and hospitality. Because as Zach said, the God we worship is the God of invitation. And he's the God who welcomes us in. To his family, to his kingdom, to eternal abundant life in loving relationship with the Father through the Son in the Spirit. Well, today we're going to take the next step in our New Vine by Design series by starting to unpack our GROW framework and focusing on, as Em said earlier, thanks Em, on building a culture of connection and a culture of community. Now, if you're new to New Vine or you've never heard of it, the GROW framework is the way here at New Vine that we want to think about the key areas of discipleship that we all want to grow in together. And those are, as you can see, connect, deepen, serve, and give. All of them are key areas of discipleship according to Scripture, according even to Jesus. And over the next 4 weeks, we'll be looking at each one of these areas as we talk about, again, the kind of culture we want to create here. And again, as we've said week after week, culture in this setting means the way we do things here, who we are when we're together, is what we mean by culture. So today we're starting with, in this GROW framework, we're starting with connect, about being intentional about building a culture of connection. And next week, Joel Noonan is going to be back, and he hasn't gone for long, has he? Joel's going to be back, and he's going to be speaking about going deeper, building a culture of discipleship and going deeper in our faith and relationship with Jesus. Now, you don't need to be a long-time churchgoer or a follower of Jesus even to know that human connection is vital to life. Last year, or actually it was a couple of years ago now, we did a series called Reconnecting. Who was around for the Reconnecting series? Yep, see a few hands. Which we started by referencing the loneliness pandemic, you might remember. Now, there's a bunch of research that confirms what we kind of know intuitively, that in this very moment in history, where we have so many opportunities for connection, this moment has promised a lot, but what it's actually delivered is pathological rates of loneliness and unconnection. 1 in 3 Aussies feel lonely. 1 in 6 experience severe loneliness. And when I say pathological, I mean literally, it's pathological. Loneliness is killing us. In the series, we saw some of the real health effects, both to our physical health and our mental health of loneliness. And I won't repeat all of those same points here, but as we can see from this quote from the then US Surgeon General, loneliness can cause the risk of premature death to increase to a rate comparable to smoking. And we all know the effects of smoking on mortality. So we live in a community, and it's true today as it was 2 years ago. We live in a community hungry for connection. People around us, in the flat next door, the house across the road, even our extended family members are hungry for genuine human connection. And even social media, which has promised so much, has largely proven anti-social. It creates a veneer of connection, filling our feeds, but not meeting our needs. In fact, it gives us a kind of false kind of connection often, because being on social media seems somehow to have this effect of exhausting our social energy without replenishing our hearts and our souls and our humanity through genuine human-to-human interaction. That's not to say social media doesn't have some benefits, particularly for those who are immobile and unable to get out and about, or keeping in touch with old classmates and long-lost friends. But on the whole, it promises something that it can't deliver, that only human-to-human interaction, for all of its quirkiness and challenges and hard work at times, requires. It's the thing that ultimately we need and crave as human beings. But what if, in this desert of deep connection and life-giving community, as we seek to intentionally create a culture at New Vine by design, what if New Vine became a place where people consistently and increasingly felt connected in amazing, authentic community? What if it was not just the experience of some of us here, but all of us here? And what if New Vine was a place you had to work really, really hard to remain unconnected? What if the default was amazing, authentic community? Well, how would that grow our own sense of connection, our own faith, and our witness to the world? But why should we even try? Can't church just be a place to come to sort of chill out, find some respite from our hyper-busy, hyper-depleted, socially exhausted lives, where we sing a few songs, send the kids off, and then snooze during the sermon for a while? Well, the Bible, in fact, Jesus himself, not only invites his followers, but he actually commands us toward a much more fulfilling form of fellowship and followership than that. He commands it of us for our own good and for the good of the world. To set the stage today, our first passage draws back the curtain of a moment in Scripture of heightened drama. The night that Jesus would be betrayed by a friend, then unjustly arrested. Hours later, he would be brutally murdered at the insistence of an angry mob and at the hands of a merciless empire, after a sham of a show trial and a manifest miscarriage of Roman justice. That all lies in the immediate future from the passage that we're about to read. And in the immediate past, that being Jesus' first followers, his immediate disciples, as they gathered upstairs for what we call the Last Supper, Jesus had taken up a bowl of water and, over the objections of at least one of them, had washed the filthy feet of his own followers. In its day, it was an act of humility and servanthood par excellence. And even as he breaks bread with the one who will betray him, yet he remains focused on the task at hand, revealing the true nature and glory of God as the God who loves in self-giving, self-sacrificing love, who overcomes evil not with equal or greater evil, but with the immense goodness and grace of his own eternal nature and being, and who through Jesus' own death will bring life to the world. Here we are at the start in John chapter 13 of the so-called farewell discourse, in which Jesus will promise the sending of another like him, the Holy Spirit, before he goes on to pray for his followers, them and those who would follow after them. That is, for us and the innumerable others who have followed Jesus throughout the ages. And before he gets to all that, he gives to us something that one Bible expert calls the simplest, clearest, and hardest command of all. And Stacey Sharpman is going to read this passage for us now. Thanks so much, Stacey.
So John 13:30 to 35. As soon as Judas had taken the bread, he went out, and it was night. When he was gone, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will glorify the Son in himself, and will glorify him at once. My children, I will be with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and just as I told the Jews, so I tell you now. Where I am going, you cannot come. A new commandment I give you: love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another."
Thank you so much, Stacey. If you've been at church for some time, you're probably familiar with this verse. And as always, familiarity can be the enemy of impact, of hearing those words for the first time or afresh. But here are some key points that might help us think about this passage in relation to building a culture of connection here at New Vine. Firstly, love one another as I have loved you. The "as I have loved you" here means something in the effect of "in the same way that I have loved you." The idea of loving those around you isn't new when Jesus says it. The idea of loving one's neighbor is found in the Old Testament, Leviticus 19. So what makes this a new commandment then? Well, Jesus is making this the foundational commandment of the new community, the new covenant and the new community. And what makes it different is the new depths demanded of this kind of love, based on the high bar of Jesus' own example. Love one another in the same way that I have loved you. Imagine, if you can, for a moment, that you're one of Jesus' disciples hearing these words from him. He's just washed your feet, which are still damp from that experience, an act which was almost inconceivable in your day. And you've seen his whole life for the past 3 years as he moves outwards towards those on the margins, the outsiders, and the outcasts. And in a few minutes, he'll say this: "Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends." In a few hours, he'll do this. He will lay down his life for you, for his friend and follower, and his neighbor, and his enemies. Love one another as I have loved you. And secondly, love one another isn't a feeling. Love one another is faithfulness. When Jesus talks about loving one another as he loved his followers, he's asking for obedience. It's clear from this passage that for Jesus' followers, connection was not a nice optional extra as followers of Jesus, but a core part of faithfulness to him. Now, if we can be real for a moment, it's so easy and often so tempting to tap out of church. Maybe you're bored with church, maybe you're just busy, Maybe you've got better offers for Sunday mornings. And let's be honest, these days at the tap of an app, you can find better preaching than mine, more professional music than ours, although it's not bad, is it? And you can even watch probably better services than what we're able to offer. What's more, you can even have an AI bot give you better company, give you maybe better pastoral care, even design a 365-day individual daily discipleship program for you without ever needing to walk through the doors of a building like ours. But what you can't get through an app, of course, or even through AI, is that fleshed out human-human connection and interaction with all of its challenges and richness. This is why it's actually hard to live a Christian life alone. Christ calls us to live our Christian existence in the church. We sang earlier in the Creed, I believe in, listed off a bunch of things from the creeds of old. I believe in the church. I believe in his holy church. Doesn't always feel that holy. But nevertheless, Christ calls us to live our Christian existence in the church among others, including amid the hardship and disagreement that often follows. But it's also easy sometimes for those who do come to church regularly to kind of fall into what I call a kind of a Christian presenteeism. Now, you know about absenteeism in the workplace, right? Absenteeism is taking excessive time off. But you might also know about presenteeism, which is turning up to work, you're physically there, but not in a productive way. You kind of loaf about and don't get much done. Well, in the same way, Christian presenteeism is coming to church but not really participating, consuming but not contributing. And look, I get it. Sometimes just getting to church on a Sunday morning is a victory in itself. We have all been there, or at least I certainly have. But this passage makes clear to roll up our sleeves and do the dirty and demanding work of creating new and better connections and community isn't an optional extra in following Jesus. It is faithful obedience to him. Of course, that can be easier for some than others, but it's an area for all of us to work at together. Thirdly, love one another is default mode, not crisis mode. We can often think about this verse as applying in sort of relationship crises when loving someone is hard, you have to dig deep and kind of grit your teeth and love somehow, kind of work up this sense that, yes, I still feel loving towards them. And while that may well be the case on many occasions, loving one another should be more a default mode, the kind of day-to-day look out for each other mode of building stronger and deeper connections with each other. And that it takes time means we need to make time when all's well, not just when all's not. And long before Jesus went to the cross at the hands of his enemies, long before he gave this commandment to his immediate followers, he himself had forged loving relationships with others, the 12, Mary, Martha, Lazarus, and others. So it isn't a crisis mode, it's a default mode. Which brings me to our final point here, and that is that love one another isn't weakness, it's witness. By this will all know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. And that makes relational life together a primary part, not just of our life together, but of our witness in the world. Over the last 2 weeks, we've talked about creating a culture of going and sending and reaching. As we've sent out Lysander and Lorinda and a team of people to plant out at West Walls End, the Colliery Church. And that's very much part, as Lysander said, of our DNA. It's who we are here, and we want to keep leaning into that and building that more and more. But as part of that, when others look under the hood of our church, they should see a culture of connection that makes them thirsty for what they see here. And it builds on our culture of inviting and welcoming in, as I said earlier. Once we've invited people, we welcome them in by helping them to connect and find the community for which they hunger. As Tom Wright puts it, this is to be the badge that the Christian community wears before the watching world. So, how do we do it? Well, there are some clues in our second passage from the book of Acts, in which we fast forward from the last day of Jesus' mortal life to the early days of the church, which he instituted before going to be with the Father. And again, to set the scene briefly, in this passage we have a snapshot, a kind of pristine picture of the early church, when all is well, before the wheels start to wobble, the bickering begins, and the loving one another turns out to be a whole lot harder than they might have first imagined. As I've said previously when I've spoken on this passage, it's easy to idealize this text, imagining that the church can and should, at any moment in time, always be able to get back to this kind of pristine moment somehow. Of course, the reality was, just 4 short chapters later, the picture-perfect postcard has kind of started to crumple at the edges. The wheels aren't just wobbling, they're starting to fall off left, right, and center. By Acts 6, we see conflict and cliques and complaining starting to emerge. And the apostles kind of have to staff up, if you like, to sort it all out. By Paul's letters, again, the wheels aren't just wobbling, they're falling off. Even the passage from Ephesians this morning, Paul is exhorting his people to bear with one another and to stay united, and so on. If you read 1 Corinthians, you see that he's responding to a real problematic kind of situation. So the challenge is real for us to continue to love one another. All the same, and even though the passage is a snapshot from a unique time in the church's history, it does give us some principles. It does give us a sense of the culture of Jesus' church, that kind of kingdom culture that Em mentioned earlier. Something to strive for, even if we have to acknowledge that the reality is often very different and very difficult in terms of work. Stacey, again, would you read this passage for us?
The fellowship of the believers, Acts 2:42-47 says, "They devoted themselves to the apostles, teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favour of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved."
Thanks so much, Stacey. That's brilliant. Well, there's lots here worthy of focus, but we aren't going to try to unpack it all today. I just want to highlight a couple of points from this. Firstly, we see here what theologians refer to as the 4 pillars of the church in this passage. 2 of them, first, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and prayer. And 2 of the 4 describe a culture of connection and community. Fellowship and breaking bread. Now, the breaking bread could refer to communion, the Lord's Supper, if you like, in a formal way, but most likely it refers more broadly to the sharing of meals together, to the sharing of what you might call table fellowship in the old kind of language. Without in any way undermining the importance of the apostles' teaching, now passed on to us in Scripture, and of course to prayer, it's significant that 2 of the 4 pillars involve community and fellowship among Jesus' followers. And then after that, there's the mention of awe, or phobos, a kind of mixture of awe and fear, at the signs and wonders that the apostles were working. And then this extraordinary record of the early Christians selling their property and possessions to share and care for those in need, and all equally. Now that is a serious form of community. But what I want to focus on for us today is the next verse, that they met regularly in the temple courts for worship, and broke bread in their homes and ate together. And we see, again, that idea of breaking bread together. There's two things here, isn't there? There's the larger gatherings for worship and then the sharing fellowship meals in their homes. And the sense here that you get reading it is that this was a regular practice. Big gatherings, reading of scriptures, prayer, etc., and also smaller meetings as followers of Jesus, doing life and faith together. So what can we take from this? Well, this is not a temple. It's not the temple courts, but it is a large gathering of us in which we come together for prayer and for worship and for reading of scripture and preaching and a whole bunch of other things as well. And we can see in this verse the value of both that larger gathering and the value of building community and connection in smaller groups. That's why, as well as our Sunday mornings, services, we have small groups at New Vine in the form of life groups and pods, which are smaller groups again. And one way of thinking about the principle in this verse is that being part of a small group, either a life group or a pod, is not just for the super keen or the super spiritual. It's the normal expression of finding fellowship and creating connection. Lots about our culture in the 21st century is, of course, very different to the culture of the first century. But now, as then, the home is where people are truly known, where needs are shared and practical care can happen at that kind of granular, person-to-person, face-to-face level. And often that can happen far more and far more effectively than it can in larger gatherings, as much as that time together after we gather is really valuable in itself. But furthermore, while in this text the apostles are present, it kind of also seems to give this sense that in the shared life of the early community, it wasn't necessarily always dependent on the leaders planning and organizing it. There was a kind of organicness, or just a culture, if you like, of people gathering together in each other's homes. And that's maybe how you know something has become culture, is when it kind of happens organically. Because can I share some bad news with you this morning? The bad news is that our staff can't do it all. We have some amazing staff who are high capacity, who give over and above and who work really hard. But you add us all up, there seems like a lot of us at times, I know, but there's actually only 4 FTE or thereabouts, 4 FTE. And when you're trying to care for a community of 300 to 350, if everyone was here on the same day, which doesn't happen much these days, there'd be about that many people. And many of those people are hurting, are grieving, are struggling, are lonely, and have needs. And as staff, we all have, kind of like as everyone does, multiple responsibilities and other tasks to attend to. And not to mention, of course, running the large gatherings every Sunday, which is kind of like organising a decent-sized event every weekend. And I'm not trying to give us a pass card where we should be working hard. But the bad news is that anyone looking to us alone to help build friendship, community, and connection, or even for their main source of pastoral care, is eventually going to find themselves frustrated, maybe disillusioned even, let down. We can't be everything everywhere all at once as much as we would love to be. But here's the good news. When we have a culture of connection and community, when more and more of us keep moving from attender to participant, from consumer to connector, using our gifts, opening our homes, breaking bread together, sharing our tables, then we will more and more consistently and increasingly build community and make it harder and harder to stay disconnected. Let me say, I know so many of you doing this already, so please don't hear this as criticism when you know you're doing it already. This is a word to all of us, myself included. But for all of our new viners who are regular and committed and have been here for some time, my job this morning is by the power invested in me by, Jesus, is to appoint you associate pastor of connection and community building at New Vine Church. So I've got to say the pay isn't great, but the rewards are immense. The point is, if every one of us sees ourselves as an associate pastor of connection and community building, every Sunday and in every group, looking for the newcomer, looking for the lonely, drawing in those on the outside who aren't talking to anyone or seem to be left on the margins. That's when we will create an even deeper culture of connection and community. So I've got some next steps, and all of us here at different stages. Some of you are still getting to know New Vine and still finding your feet here and still looking for those first connections to be made. Some of you are just visiting even. Some have been here for a long time and still hunger for more community, more genuine community. So I've got some next steps. Visitors, that's those of you here for the first time or in the first few weeks. You're still trying us on to see, like a new pair of jeans, whether we're a fit for you or not. Well, let me invite you to take the next step of joining us, what was mentioned in Church News and M this morning, for a newcomers coffee next Sunday straight after the service. We're going to hold these about every month going forward. So come and join us. It's a chance for me and other leaders here to meet you and get to know you a little bit and perhaps help you on that journey to starting to connect. As said, coffee or beverage on us, we'd like to give you a small gift, but your presence, you coming along, will be a gift to us, enabling us to get to know you. If you're a sort of not quite a visitor, but you're kind of a newcomer, you've been coming for some time, maybe a month or more, maybe 6 months, more than that even, but you're still waiting to make more connections, then let me encourage you to try a life group for a term, just even for a term. Let us know that you're interested in doing that. See myself or Jill, whose photo you saw several times up on the screen. You probably know Jill, of course. Let us know that you're interested in trying that. Or maybe try a short course. We've got a few coming up, and they last about a term or less. We're doing Practicing the Way, probably next term. We've got Alpha coming up this term. Sign up for one of those. Or join a simple serving team where you can start building friendships by serving shoulder to shoulder with someone else. For example, the coffee cart. It's a kind of an easy way to serve, to get to know some people that you're working alongside, but also get to learn a whole lot of other people's names as you're writing them on their coffee cup lids. But there are many ways that you can serve, of course. And if you're a new viner who is still looking for deeper relationships, let me challenge you to take the next step, to find and take a step that for you helps move from just kind of attender to participant. Again, maybe commit to a life group or form a pod, 2 or 3, 4 other people, or intentionally invite and host others for meals. And if you've done it once and it didn't really work out, maybe it's worth trying again. Sometimes it takes the second or third attempt for that to stick. Maybe invite a couple of couples or a couple of families or a couple of other people, and look out for those who you think might also be looking for friendships or community. Finally, for our long-term new viners, here's my challenge to us all this morning, myself included. As associate pastors of connection and community building, here are 3 simple habits. Be creative. Come up with your own ways. But 3 simple habits to help us build a culture of connection and community at New Vine. And these can be called the habits, the 3-2-1 habits of connection. 3, the 3-minute rule. Spend the first 3 minutes after the service looking for, finding, and talking to someone that you don't know very well. Maybe newcomers or those sitting on their own, standing on their own. Get to know them. Be the one who goes to connect with Patrice and the Patrices amongst us. So that's 3. 2, help connect someone with 2 other people. When you're talking to that person or in other conversation, say, hey, let me introduce you to this person. Let me introduce you to someone else. I think you might really like this person. And if you can help them connect with 2 other people, maybe one of those will be the spark of some ongoing friendship that forms, some ongoing community that builds. So that's the 3-minute rule. Connect someone with 2 other people. And 1, help bear 1 burden. Ask, what's one thing I can pray for you or help you with today? So 3, 2, 1, 3 minutes after the service, and maybe that'll turn into 15 minutes, even better. But 3 minutes, the first 3 minutes, connect with 2 other people and bear one burden. What can I pray for or help with today? And then follow through. Well, let me finish with 4 questions from before. What if New Vine became a place where people consistently and increasingly felt connected in amazing, authentic, thirst-quenching community? What would that look like? What would that be like for all of us? And what if this was not just the experience for some, but for all of us here? And all who came to visit and decided to stay. And what if New Vine was a place you had to work really, really hard to remain unconnected? Wouldn't that be awesome? You have to literally choose to stay on the outer for whatever reason. Now, let me challenge us with this last question, not up there. How might those things change our own sense of connection, deep human community, for which we're all hungry for at the end of the day, no matter how socially exhausted we feel on the surface? How might it encourage us in our faith? And how might it just revolutionize our witness to the world? Because by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, by your love for one another. Amen.